One forgotten ranger vanished in the desert that week, but it was the dog who heard her first. The heat shimmered off the cracked sand, vultures circled high above, and while the rescue team gave up, one retired K9 stood motionless beneath the blistering sun, his eyes locked on something no one else could see. Somewhere out there, a woman was chained to a cactus, left to die in silence. No one noticed the broken compass in the dirt. No one smelled the blood, but he did. And what he led them to changed everything. A betrayed ranger, a secret buried beneath the dunes, and a dog whose loyalty refused to die. This is the story of how a scarred German shepherd and a woman left for dead found something stronger than survival: redemption, a bond, a second chance. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe every soul deserves a second chance, hit that subscribe button, because this one will stay with you long after it ends. The heat rolled off the desert floor like waves of fire. In the distance, vultures circled low, their black wings slicing through a sky so blue it burned to look at. Red Hollow, Arizona, a town barely held together by dry wind and old promises, baked silently under the 112 degrees Fahrenheit sun. Somewhere beyond the reserve lines, the sand whispered secrets only the wild could hear. Max stood at the edge of the ravine, motionless. The old German shepherd barely blinked as the dry wind whipped past, ruffling his thick, sun-faded coat. He was broad and muscular, but carried himself with a grace uncommon for his age. His fur had lost its shine, dulled by time and memory, and a long scar ran diagonally down his left flank, a souvenir from a war he never meant to survive. One of his eyes, cloudy with an old injury, seemed distant, like it was always looking somewhere else, somewhere far behind him. "Max, heal!" The voice came from Corporal Diane Watts, trudging across the sandstone ridge behind him. Mid-40s, sun-beaten, tall and wiry, Diane had been a ranger for 18 years. Her face wore the fatigue of someone who had seen too many dehydration rescues and not enough happy endings. Her hair, once blonde, was tied back in a tight braid, streaked now with sand and silver. She was sweating through her tan shirt, boots coated in dust. Behind her trailed two younger K9S Rex, a wiry 4-year-old with a darker coat and an attitude to match. He never missed a signal, never hesitated. His build was compact, powerful, his brown eyes always darting, calculating. Then there was Luna, 3 years old, sleek, black with a single white blaze across her chest. She was the tracker, the one with a nose that could find blood under concrete. She moved with quiet confidence, ears constantly twitching, sniffing everything twice. The three of them were the heart of Red Hollow's K9 unit, trained for search, rescue, and recovery. But today was supposed to be simple, a routine patrol of the outer sector near the Red Verge, a dry region filled with abandoned coyote trails and bleached cattle skulls. Max didn't move. Diane reached him, slightly winded. "Max, come on, stay with the team." Still nothing. Then, just as she reached for his collar, Max's body tensed. His head turned slightly, nostrils flaring. It was barely a twitch, but to Diane it was loud as a siren. "Something's out here," she murmured. Rex growled low in his throat. Luna sniffed once, then twice, and began pacing in circles. The air shifted. Max stepped forward, slow but steady, muscles rippling beneath the sun-scorched coat. His paws pressed into the fine dust, each step silent. He moved like a ghost in the daylight, unhurried but urgent. His ears pricked forward, tail rigid. He smelled it. Something old, something buried. No, it wasn't just the dry scent of blood or sweat or oil. It was something familiar, something that lived in the back of his brain like a splinter that never came out. Fear, raw and human, pain, and beneath it all, a trace of her. Diane radioed back. "Control, this is Delta Unit. Alpha K9 is tracking unknown scent, possible human. Breaking patrol protocol, coordinates uploading now." She hesitated, then looked at the others. "Let's follow." Miles away, inside the ranger station's dusty operations room, Evan Reyes sat hunched over a glowing screen. The hum of old fans barely touched the air. Sweat slicked his back. Evan was tall and awkward, with dark curly hair tied loosely, and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. 24, just 2 months into his ranger internship, and still clinging to his college habits. Notes scribbled everywhere, camera slung over one shoulder, and a curiosity that often outpaced his caution. He wasn't supposed to be on the internal archive, but the name caught his eye. Kate Madison K4, Biofield 11, locked, classified. He frowned. Kate had been missing for 5 days. The report was vague. Temporary communication failure during route recon, but something about it gnawed at him. She was experienced, calm, meticulous. Rangers joked she could find a cactus in a snowstorm, and now there was no trace. He clicked again. Access denied. Why would a field ranger's file be marked under biofield? He muttered. He stood and pushed away from the desk. Dust floated lazily in the airshaft light, casting gold halos on the stacks of boxed reports behind him. On the wall beside the door was a photo. Kate, smiling awkwardly, sunburned cheeks, red hair tied in a sloppy knot, standing next to Max. He was younger in that photo. So was she. Happier. At ease. Evan grabbed his notebook and started jotting keywords. Biofield. K4. K9 unit reassignments. Lost units. Then he underlined one thing. Why Max? Back in the desert, Max pushed deeper into the heat. The wind changed direction, and with it came a whisper of scent so sharp it jolted through his spine like lightning. It wasn't just blood or heat stroke. It was terror. Recent. Alive. He stopped at the crest of a sandy bluff overlooking a low gully of rocks and half-dead brush. Rex came up beside him, tail high, barking once. Luna circled behind, her body lowered, ears twitching. Below, something moved. Not visibly, but in scent, in vibration. Max's nose wrinkled, his eyes narrowed. A human had passed through here, wounded, desperate, and the trail wasn't cold. Diane reached the bluff moments later, squinting into the sun. Her radio crackled. Backup is an hour out. We're not waiting, she whispered, mostly to herself. Max had already gone over the edge. He didn't know what waited at the end of this scent trail, but his body moved on instinct. Older than the leash, older than training. It was something inside his chest, and somewhere, buried deep beneath scars and commands, he remembered a voice, a hand, a girl, a moment, and the scent was hers. The trail grew sharper as Max descended into the basin where the sun hung directly overhead, hammering everything with equal fury. The heat warped the air like ghost fire, and the wind blew sand like ash across the dry gullies. Rex and Luna followed behind him, no longer questioning where they were going. Max's body moved with purpose, as though someone were pulling an invisible leash deep in his chest. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. The scent was stronger now. Fear, blood, and something else. Memory. The canyon narrowed between two sandstone ridges, and then it opened into a clearing where a cluster of giant saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels, their arms stretched in jagged, twisted silence, casting only the faintest shadows on the cracked earth. A dead silence hung here. No birds, no bugs, not even the hum of wind. Max stopped. His ears flicked once. Then he stepped forward slowly, paws padding over brittle ground, until he reached the base of the largest cactus. There, slumped against the spiny trunk, bound by a length of rusted chain, was Kate Madison. Her ranger uniform was torn at the sleeves, dust-covered and bleached from sun. Her skin, once warm and freckled, had turned a sickly gray pink beneath layers of sweat and grime. Her red hair had come loose from its braid, sticking in strands to her cheeks. Dried blood clung to the edge of her lip. Her eyes, half-lidded and glassy, flickered faintly. She was alive. Barely. Max didn't rush. He approached like a soldier entering a holy place. He sniffed her hand. Still warm. Faint. His tail did not wag. He simply lowered his head and let his breath touch her knuckles. Her fingers twitched. Her lips moved. A word. Maybe a name. Ghost. Behind him, Diane Watts caught sight of the scene and froze. Her chest tightened as she took in the image. The chains, the wounds, the brutal sun. She dropped to one knee beside Kate, calling in coordinates. This is Delta Unit. I found Ranger Madison. She's alive but in critical condition. Possible abduction, possible torture, immediate medevac needed. Max didn't move. He sat beside Kate like a statue carved of fur and scar and heat. He didn't flinch when Luna lay down quietly behind him, or when Rex stood on alert, circling the perimeter. Max's gaze remained locked on Kate. His body shielded hers from the sun. She had saved him once. Now it was his turn. Back in Red Hollow, Evan Reyes slammed his car door shut and approached the rust-colored trailer at the edge of the reserve grounds. The name stenciled faintly on the side read, M. McBride, K-9 unit retired. The place smelled of old metal and mesquite wood. Evan hesitated before knocking. The door opened before he could. "Didn't expect anyone before sunset," came a gravelly voice. Marshall McBride was a man grown from desert rock. Late 60s, thick white beard cropped close, skin like tanned leather, eyes pale and sharp under bushy brows. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a button-up shirt stained from age and sweat. His shoulders were still square, but he walked with a limp, a souvenir from a long-ago mission in Fallujah. Evan held up his ID. "I'm a field intern. I need to ask about Ranger Kate Madison." McBride didn't blink. "She's missing." "She was," Evan said. "Until Max found her." McBride's eyes darkened. "He broke protocol, didn't he?" "He did. Took off without a signal, just like that." McBride stepped back, motioning him inside. The trailer was clean but sparse. Books stacked beside ammo crates, an old military jacket draped over a gun rack. A dusty photograph sat above the kitchen sink, a younger McBride standing beside a German shepherd, both in full tactical gear. The dog had Max's eyes. "I trained him," McBride said, voice low. "Back when he was Ghost." "Ghost?" Evan repeated. McBride nodded slowly. "Operation Biofield 11. Classified back then. Still is, mostly. They tested sensory amplification tech, microchips wired into the olfactory and limbic system. Dogs could smell things 10 miles out. Emotions, memory, even trace resonance from trauma. You're saying Max can smell emotion?" "No," McBride said. "I'm saying he remembers hers, and that she remembers him. Doesn't matter what names they were given, that bond doesn't break." Evan sat down heavily. But why chain her up? Who did this? McBride didn't answer right away. He walked to a cabinet, pulled out a weathered file with a red stripe across it. Kate was involved in the original project, not as a handler, she was a subject, volunteer. They said she was emotionally compatible with advanced K-9 units. Turned out, she was too compatible. They had to shut her down. Evan blinked. Shut her down? McBride opened the file. A photo showed Kate, younger, wearing a neural headset, kneeling beside Max, then Ghost. Her hand was on his muzzle. His eyes were locked on hers. They erased her connection, said it was interfering with mission clarity, but I think it never left. Not for either of them. Evan's voice went quiet. "So when Max veered off?" "He wasn't tracking a scent," McBride finished. "He was answering a call." The chopper arrived an hour later, blades scattering the dust as medics rushed in. Kate's vitals were weak but stable. Diane kept pace with the stretcher, rattling off observations. Luna and Rex stood to the side, panting but alert. And Max, dirt-caked and solemn, watched as Kate was loaded into the helicopter. He didn't try to follow. Instead, he sat down exactly where she had been. Eyes on the cactus, ears twitching, as if guarding the place she nearly died, or waiting for something else. The rotor blades of the helicopter faded into the horizon, leaving behind a strange silence. Dust swirled in soft spirals around the base of the cactus where Kate had nearly died. Max stood exactly where she had been moments before, his massive frame shadowing the sand that still held the imprint of her body. He didn't move when the medics had taken her. He hadn't flinched when Diane had tried to coax him away. He simply stood guard, still and firm, as if the very idea of leaving her side, even after she was gone, was unthinkable. Rex paced the edge of the clearing, ears pricked and tail stiff. His movements were quick and precise, like a machine scanning for threats. Luna, quieter but equally alert, sat beside Max and stared at the cactus, as if trying to understand what had just happened. She leaned her body slightly into Max's side. He didn't acknowledge it, but he didn't pull away either. Corporal Diane Watts stood a few feet back, watching the three dogs, her brow furrowed, lips pursed. She had worked with plenty of canines, but this was different. Max wasn't just loyal, he was haunted. She finally stepped forward and crouched beside him. "She's safe now, boy. You did it." Max turned his head slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. For a moment, Diane felt as if she were looking into the eyes of someone, not something with a memory far longer than hers. Then he turned away again. That was when the backup team arrived, a dark green SUV, coated in dust and marked with Red Hollow Field OPS, pulled up to the edge of the clearing. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a crisp khaki uniform, sunglasses hiding his expression. Captain Neil Branford was in his early 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair cut close to the scalp. His square jaw was clean-shaven, but the deep lines around his mouth suggested years of suppressing emotion rather than expressing it. He had a reputation, strict, rule-bound, efficient. His voice never rose, but it didn't need to. People listened when he spoke, and they rarely liked what they heard. "Where's the Ranger?" he asked, voice flat. "Medevac took her 10 minutes ago," Diane replied. "She was chained up. Looked like she'd been there for days." Branford scanned the area without expression. "Who found her?" Diane gestured toward Max. The captain glanced at the German shepherd, then frowned. "That dog's not scheduled for field work." "He wasn't scheduled for heroics either," Diane said tightly, "but he saved her life." Branford walked a slow circle around Max, observing. "Dogs don't act on their own." "No," she said, "not unless something in them still remembers how to disobey." Max didn't even twitch as Branford passed. He had eyes only for the trail ahead, the same trail that had brought him here, but something in him still stirred. The heat, the cactus, the scent of blood. It triggered fragments in his mind. Desert dust, metal, screams, and then silence. A mission gone wrong. A woman calling his name. The memory pressed at him like a weight. He stepped forward, not toward the base, not toward the chopper pad, but back into the canyon. Rex and Luna followed. In a dim server room back at Red Hollow HQ, Evan Reyes sat surrounded by wires and humming hard drives. He'd spent the past hour decoding backup GPS logs from the patrol devices. Kate's tracker should have pinged every 20 minutes. It hadn't. Instead, the last 30 pings had been uniform. Too uniform. Evan zoomed in. Each GPS log was the same down to the decimal. Impossible. "She was stationary," he whispered, "but not there." He pulled up a map overlay. Her last transmission had come from 10 miles north of the Cactus. A blank patch of desert. No trails, no caves, no signal towers. That's when he saw the overlay fade. The GPS had been spoofed. Someone wanted her found somewhere else. Footsteps approached. He turned to see McBride enter the room, moving slowly but with deliberate weight. The old trainer had changed into a cleaner shirt, but his face looked more drawn, more serious. "You found something?" McBride asked. Evan nodded, turned the screen toward him. "Someone faked her coordinates. She was never in the place the tracker showed. Someone wanted her missing long enough to suffer, but not to die. Not right away." McBride's jaw clenched. "White dust." Evan frowned. "That again?" McBride sat heavily. It was more than biofield. That was the public name. White dust was the real program. Emotion-driven response coding. They used it to link dogs to human brainwaves, enhance empathy. But too much empathy becomes instability. Kate was flagged early. They said she bonded too deep. Evan stared. "So they tried to erase it?" "They buried it," McBride said. "But you can't unteach love. You can't rewire loyalty, especially in someone like Max. He was trained to protect her, even after forgetting why." Evan hesitated. Who ran White Dust? McBride's face tightened. Jacob Lang, assistant director at the time, disappeared after the congressional inquiry. Rumor was he had tech prototypes no one else had access to. Then, nothing. Until now. Evan opened a personnel database, typed the name, no current matches. But a chill ran through him. What if someone inside Red Hollow helped move Kate into the desert? He asked. If Lang still had assets? McBride stood. Then, we're not just looking at a failed mission. We're looking at a trap. Back in the canyon, Max came to a stop. He stood on a bluff overlooking the basin where Kate had been found, his ears twitching. Rex flanked his right. Luna paced the rocks behind. A rustle in the shrubs drew their attention. Nothing moved. Then Max barked, once, short, then again, lower, urgent. Corporal Watts came jogging up behind them. "Max!" He barked again, then stepped forward, not in alarm, in caution. Watts raised her radio. "Unit 3, approach slowly. Alpha K9 is signaling an alert." The backup team stepped carefully into view. Max turned and growled, not in hostility, but warning. His eyes flicked toward the brush again. Watts moved closer and finally saw it. A hidden wire, thin, barely visible, leading to a small metal box wedged beneath a rock. She froze. "Tripwire," she breathed. "It was booby-trapped." Branford arrived seconds later, pale under the tan uniform. "What the hell?" Watts looked up at him. "You still think Max acted on instinct?" Max sat down, staring at the brush, tail still. A protector, a soldier, a ghost who remembered what others tried to forget. The hospital room was dim, air-conditioned to a clinical chill. Pale sunlight filtered through the thin blinds, throwing a striped pattern across the white sheets. The only sound was the steady rhythm of the heart monitor beside the bed and the occasional hush of nurses passing in the hallway. In the stillness, a pair of eyes fluttered open, dry, bloodshot, but unmistakably alive. Kate Madison blinked slowly. Her throat burned. Her lips cracked when she tried to speak. Her whole body ached with dehydration, sun exposure, and the weight of whatever chemicals had dulled her senses. But as her vision cleared, the first word that came out wasn't a cry for help. It was a name. Ranger, Ghost. The nurse beside her, mid-40s with warm brown skin, tightly coiled braids, and a floral badge that read Shelia M., looked up in surprise. "Sweetheart, you're awake. Don't move too fast now." But Kate wasn't listening. In her mind, the name echoed again. Ghost. The name she'd whispered in the dark, in the dust, in the part of her that had never forgotten. She turned her head slowly toward the window. The desert heat still shimmered on the horizon beyond the hospital parking lot. But here inside, everything felt muted and empty. Max wasn't there, but his scent, his presence, still clung to her memory like the touch of a hand she hadn't held in years. She whispered again, "Max." Memories began bleeding back in fragments, sharp and disjointed. A mission gone wrong. Screams, smoke, the dry blast of a sonic weapon. Her own voice, raw with panic, calling out as Max, then Ghost, pulled her from the fire. She remembered his eyes, clear, determined. The way he shielded her from falling debris. And then, the moment he was taken. Dragged away from her by handlers in black gear, her body too weak to fight them off. They said the mission had failed. They said the dog had gone rogue. They said she wasn't stable enough to stay in the program. And then, silence, reassignment, paperwork, a lifetime of lies. But Max had remembered her, even after all this time. Even after being renamed, reprogrammed, refiled, he had come back. A tear slid down her temple into her hairline. Kate closed her eyes, not because she was weak, but because the truth was heavier than her body could carry. And somewhere, out there, Max was walking through heat and ash again, because he'd never stopped guarding her. Across the reserve, in the far end of the server bunker, Evan Reyes stared at the flickering screen in front of him. Dust motes floated in the projector beam as a low-resolution video played on the cracked monitor. It was grainy, dated. The timestamp in the corner read 0718WD/OP3, nearly 8 years old. On screen, the footage showed an arid testing zone, blocky bunkers, wire fencing, a control tower. In the middle, a young woman in full tactical gear crouched beside a German shepherd, cradling his bloodied head. The dog was panting hard, body trembling. Her face, undeniably Kate Madison's, was streaked with ash, cuts, and sweat. Behind her, a black transport truck screeched to a stop. Men in field uniforms rushed forward. Kate stood up, shouting, trying to shield the dog with her body. 2 men grabbed her. Another secured a muzzle over the dog's snout. He struggled violently, growling through the restraint. "Ghost!" she screamed. He barked once, hoarse but furious, and then he was gone, dragged into the truck. The last frame froze on her face. Desperation, fury, betrayal. The audio finally caught up. "Stand down, Ranger Madison. You've been relieved." Then a second voice, male, calm, almost too calm. "Reassign Subject 11. Reset parameters. Transfer to Field Obedience Unit." The camera swiveled slightly. It caught a profile, just a glimpse, but Evan knew the face. Jacob Lang. He hit pause. His hand trembled. Jacob Lang wasn't just some field officer. He was now the executive director of Red Hollow Conservation Unit, the man in charge of every decision, every deployment, every silence. Evan stood slowly, the weight of what he'd seen sinking into his chest like lead. Kate hadn't just been left behind. She had been betrayed. Meanwhile, under the burning mid-afternoon sun, Max trotted silently along the edge of the Red Verge Trail, just beyond the rescue site. His paws kicked up soft puffs of sand. Luna followed close behind, tail low, head tilted as if still listening for something. Rex took up the rear, flanking in wide arcs like a soldier on patrol. They weren't hunting. They were remembering. The cactus clearing was long behind them now, but the heat still sang in the air. And Max carried something more than memory. He stopped suddenly at a cluster of stones, nose twitching. Not scent, sound. A faint, high-frequency whine barely audible to human ears. Max's ears turned back. He stepped slowly around the rocks and found a small metal node lodged between two stones. Barely noticeable. The kind of device used for field surveillance, experimental tech from years past. He sniffed it. The scent was familiar. Not from Red Hollow. From somewhere before. He pawed once at the dirt, then lay down beside it, watching, waiting. In the hospital, Kate had finally sat up. Ivy's tugged at her arms. Shelia, the nurse, had called in the doctor, but Kate waved them off. She was tired, yes, but more than that, she was awake. She looked toward the window again. Her voice was soft but certain. "He came for me." The doctor, a man in his 50s with gentle eyes and a clipped mustache, furrowed his brow. "Who did?" Kate smiled faintly. "Ranger Ghost." The doctor gave her a puzzled look. "You mean Max?" She nodded. "That's what they call him now, but that's not who he is." Across town, in an office lined with glass and minimalist furniture, Jacob Lang leaned back in his leather chair. Early 60s, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blazer, his salt and pepper hair swept back in precise lines. His face was still smooth, but there was a chill behind his eyes, like a man who had spent years learning how to smile without meaning it. A knock at his door. A junior assistant entered, a young man with buzzed hair and nervous posture. "Sir, there was movement on the biofield archive this morning. One of the interns accessed the Ghost Madison file." Lang didn't look up from his tablet. "Name?" "Evan Reyes." Lang finally glanced up and smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. The convoy moved slowly along the cracked desert road, tires crunching over sun-bleached gravel. The midday sun bore down in heavy sheets of heat, warping the horizon and painting false mirages in every direction. The lead vehicle, a sand-battered black SUV, carried Kate in the back seat, her body still recovering, her mind spinning through fragments of memory and pain. Max sat beside her, head resting near her thigh, his bandaged shoulder pressed against the doorframe. Though he was wounded, his amber eyes remained sharp, scanning every dune they passed. He hadn't left her side since they pulled her from the cactus. Not once. Riding behind them in the second vehicle were Rex and Luna, both alert and tense. The air was wrong. Too still, too quiet. Even the vultures seemed to have flown elsewhere. Kate reached out a hand and let it rest gently on Max's head. "You came back," she whispered, "even when I didn't know how to call you." He didn't move, but his ear twitched like he heard something far in the distance. The driver, a lean Hispanic man in his early 30s named Miguel, wiped sweat from his brow and checked his mirrors. He had a short beard, faded tattoos under his sleeve, and a calm, quiet confidence. A former Army medic turned Ranger transport, Miguel rarely spoke, but he noticed everything. "We're 20 out from base," he said. Kate nodded faintly, but just as she leaned back, Max sat up. He growled, low, deep. Miguel's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. "That dog sensing something?" Before anyone could answer, the sand exploded. A blur of movement burst from beneath the ridge to their left. Dark, massive, fast. The impact rocked the SUV as the front was lifted off the ground and smashed back down. Tires skidded. Metal groaned. Max barked, sharp and furious, and launched toward the window as the beast hit the side of the vehicle. Kate screamed. From the trailing truck, Rex began barking, lunging at the cage gate. Luna let out a high-pitched yelp, not of fear, but of readiness. The thing outside was not a dog, not anymore. It moved like a K9, but larger, heavily scarred, its fur patchy, teeth too long, eyes pale and unseeing. A monster made from muscle, training, and abandonment, a leftover ghost from the failed White Dust trials. They had experimented not just on connection, but augmentation, and this one had survived. Barely. Now it was feral, silent, a weapon forgotten by its maker. Max slammed his body against the door, forcing it open just as the creature lunged again. Blood splattered across the glass as claws scraped metal. Max met it head-on, teeth flashing. He took the impact at the shoulder and was thrown to the ground. Dust exploded around them. Kate screamed his name. The other vehicle braked hard. Doors opened. Rex leapt out first, his movement controlled, surgical. His ears back, body low. Luna followed a heartbeat later, angling to flank. They didn't bark. They didn't need to. This was instinct, yes. But more than that, it was old training, awakened, remembered. Max struggled to his feet, bleeding at the shoulder. He didn't hesitate. The mutated K9 turned toward Kate's vehicle, ready to lunge again. But Max intercepted. He bit down on the creature's neck, not to kill, but to hold. Rex darted in from behind, nipping at its legs, drawing it back. Luna leapt high, hitting the back with her full weight. Together, the three worked not as separate dogs, but as a unit, as if they had once trained together in a life now erased. From a distance, Evan Reyes arrived in a dusty field truck, tires screeching as he jumped out with a tranquilizer rifle shaking in his hands. His face was pale with panic, his hair matted with sweat. "Get clear!" he yelled. The dogs didn't back off, but they shifted just enough. Max ducking left, Luna pivoting right. Evan took aim. A hiss. The dart flew. Impact. The mutated K9 staggered, stumbled, and collapsed, its breathing ragged and shallow. Silence followed. Max limped to Kate's side, blood soaking his fur, body trembling, but eyes still clear. She dropped to her knees beside him. "You're bleeding." "Oh my God, Max." He leaned his head into her chest. Not like a dog, like a soldier returning to base. That night, Red Hollow HQ was buzzing with noise. Paramedics treated Max's injuries. Luna and Rex were cleaned and fed. The creature was sedated in a reinforced cage under watch by 2 armed officers. No one knew what to call it. Some refused to look at it altogether. Kate sat quietly in the infirmary. She had changed into clean clothes, her wounds wrapped. But her face, pale, drawn, carried the mark of something deeper than physical harm. Across the hallway, Evan stood before a large glass window, looking out over the K9 holding bay. He was no longer quiet. He was furious. That night, he confronted Jacob Lang. He didn't schedule a meeting. He walked straight into the executive office. Lang looked up from his desk, calm, polished, still in that same navy suit, not a wrinkle out of place. He tapped a pen on the table. "I assume this is about the recovery incident?" Evan didn't answer. He simply slid a flash drive across the desk. Lang's eyes narrowed. "What's this?" "Everything I've recovered from White Dust," Evan said. "The test footage, the GPS falsifications, and your voice ordering Ghost's reassignment." Lang exhaled slowly, then leaned back. "You're making dangerous assumptions, Mr. Reyes." "No," Evan said. "I'm making decisions." Lang's voice dropped. "Be careful. Your future here is flexible." Evan leaned forward. "You left her out there to die, and you left that thing buried in the sand." Lang's lips curled. "You're a boy playing with matches. You don't understand what you're holding." "I don't need to," Evan said, "because someone else will." He walked out before Lang could respond. An hour later, in his small apartment above the Ranger barracks, Evan uploaded the flash drive's contents into a secure email. He typed, "You were right. They buried it. But I saw them, Kate and Ghost. He remembered her. He protected her. And they tried to erase that. Not anymore. Evan Reyes. He clicked send to a journalist named Marla Densley, a freelance investigative reporter who had once written a banned piece on biofield ethics and government animal weaponization. She had vanished from the press 5 years ago, but Evan had her encrypted contact. He sat back, hands shaking, and whispered, "I'm not quiet anymore." The canvas roof of the medical tent flapped lightly in the breeze, and the air inside was thick with the scent of iodine, desert dust, and freshly laundered cotton sheets. Outside, the sun blazed high over Red Hollow, turning the sand into a mirror of gold. But within the tent, time moved slower, more tender, more deliberate. There, in a bed that still smelled faintly of cactus oil and fear, Kate Madison stirred, not with confusion this time, but clarity. She opened her eyes to silence. Not emptiness, peace. Beside her bed lay Max. His fur was matted in places with dried blood and dust, one leg bandaged, an IV line gently taped to his flank. His breathing was even, slow. His ears twitched when she moved. Kate turned her body toward him. Her arms still felt heavy, but her fingers moved with certainty. She reached out, curled them gently under his jaw, and whispered, "You never forgot me." Max didn't bark. He didn't lift his head, but his tail thumped once against the cot leg, soft, deliberate. Kate smiled through her tears. "I don't care what they renamed you. You're still Ghost, and you always were mine." The flap of the tent rustled. Corporal Diane Watts stepped inside, clipboard in hand, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors out of habit before they softened at the sight before her. She was a strong woman, broad-shouldered, short natural curls tucked under her patrol cap, freckles scattered across her dark skin like constellations. She had seen combat zones in foreign deserts, but this moment, stilled even her trained heart. "They said you might not speak right away," she said gently. Kate didn't look away from Max. "I've been silent long enough." Later that day, under the open sky, the dogs were brought out for public commendation. The press had arrived like a desert storm. Whispers of scandal had turned into headlines overnight. The footage Evan had released had gone viral. The mutated K9, the truth about white dust, the betrayal inside Red Hollow. Journalists shouted over one another, drones buzzed above, and in the middle of it all stood 3 battered, beautiful survivors. Rex was the first to be called. He limped forward, one leg wrapped in a pale blue brace, his eyes bright but cautious. A high-tech medical sensor patch blinked gently on his side, monitoring vitals in real time. He didn't trust the crowd, but when Diane crouched to pin the badge on his harness, he leaned his head briefly against her chest, a rare sign of affection from a dog who once bit every vet who came near. Then came Luna, tail held high, tongue lolling despite the heat. She trotted up beside Evan, who knelt down with an expression halfway between pride and disbelief. He rubbed behind her ears and whispered something that made her wiggle with joy. "She's coming home with me," Evan later told the crowd. "They say she has the right temperament for therapy work, but I think she already is therapy." And then came Max, the oldest, the quietest, Ghost. He was slow to stand, not because he was weak, but because every movement carried weight, history, memory. When he approached Kate, now seated in a wheelchair beside the makeshift podium, the crowd hushed. No one had to ask who he was. Kate removed the ceremonial badge from its box and pressed it against his chest strap. "You never needed a medal," she said softly, "but you deserve one." Max sat, straight-backed, head tilted slightly toward her. When she leaned in and whispered, "Echo," his ears twitched again. And the crowd, perhaps unsure why they were moved, applauded like thunder. Far away in a federal building wrapped in steel and shadows, Jacob Lang sat in a holding cell. He was no longer immaculate. His hair was disheveled, the crisp navy blazer replaced by an orange jumpsuit, and his face, always unreadable, was now slack with quiet fury. Outside the glass wall, a man in a gray suit read off formal charges: unauthorized human experimentation, conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of federal investigation. But Lang wasn't listening. He was staring at the small screen on the wall, where a live broadcast played. Kate, Max, Evan, the unit they couldn't break. A file folder marked Echo K9 sat on the agent's desk. Lang closed his eyes, not in regret, but in defeat. They remembered. That was all it took. Back in Red Hollow, the temporary hospital tents were being replaced with permanent shelters. New training programs were being drafted. The words, empathy-based response systems, were being painted over. No more ghost units, no more erasures. Only memory, only truth, and the ones who lived it. Kate was transferred to a quieter ward. No more beeping machines, just sunlight and the distant bark of dogs being trained. She sat beneath an awning, her arm resting gently over Max's neck. He didn't move much, but he stayed beside her, always within breath's distance. Evan came by with Luna, a leash looped casually around his wrist. He wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair finely combed. He looked like someone who had found, not peace, exactly, but purpose. "You're healing," he said. "So are you," she replied. He held out a folder. Echo K9 proposal. They wanted approved by the end of the quarter. Kate flipped it open. Inside were photos. Max, Luna, Rex. Training modules, emotional syncing standards, new tech, ethical oversight. And at the top, the mission statement, not all wounds are visible, not all voices are heard, but every echo tells a story worth listening to. Kate traced her fingers over Max's badge. "He told it first," she said. Evan smiled. And for the first time in years, so did she. The sun was sinking low over Red Hollow, painting the dunes in strokes of bronze and rust. Heat still lingered in the ground, but the air had softened, cooled by the wind that rolled across the hills like a whisper too old to trace. The desert, once a place of silence and secrets, now murmured with quiet life. The call of a kestrel overhead, the rattle of dry grass, the soft rustle of movement from 3 figures seated beneath the shade of a new observation awning built atop the highest ridge. Kate Madison sat cross-legged on a woolen blanket, boots off, her bare feet dug into the warm earth like roots rediscovering home. Her hair, once knotted and sunburnt, now framed her face in soft, sun-touched waves. The bandages on her arms had come off 2 days earlier. The scars, some fresh, some old, remained, but she wore them like medals. Beside her lay Max. His muzzle was grayer than ever, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his posture held the same unshakable calm as it always had. He didn't pant. He breathed slowly, rhythmically, each inhale a song of patience, each exhale a lullaby of peace. Kate reached over, fingers gliding over the jagged scar along his left shoulder. "They called it a defect," she said, voice soft. "But I think it was a memory, one your body never forgot, even when they tried to erase your mind." Max blinked once. The wind played through the fur around his neck. A few feet away, Rex lounged in the shade, his brace now smaller, sleeker, fitted by a specialized team from Arizona State's Veterinary Tech Division. He had grown more social since the attack, no longer baring teeth at strangers. He now let local children pat his head during school field trips. His posture still snapped to alert when unfamiliar boots approached, but now he would wait, judge, before reacting. And Luna? Luna was off chasing grasshoppers. She darted between patches of scrub, nose low, tail high, occasionally glancing back to make sure the others were watching. Her spirit hadn't changed. If anything, it had grown brighter. She wore a blue collar now, with Evan's phone number and the words "therapy and training" stitched in bold thread. But she didn't need training. She was therapy. Evan arrived just as the sun touched the edge of the horizon. He wore cargo shorts, dusty boots, and a faded Ranger tee with the new Echo K9 emblem over his chest. 3 dog silhouettes beneath a rising sun. His hair was longer now, swept back with a careless charm, and a camera swung from his neck, coated with fine desert grit. "Hey," he called out. "You're in the perfect light. Hold still." Kate rolled her eyes but smiled. "You know I hate pictures." He knelt down anyway and snapped one, Kate's fingers resting gently on Max's fur. Rex curled beside her, Luna mid-air in the background like a golden blur of joy. He checked the image, nodded to himself. "For the wall," he said. Behind them, the new echo shelter was visible, a modest structure of adobe and glass, powered by solar panels, surrounded by training yards and shaded kennels. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, humane, and built on something stronger than funding: loyalty. Inside, a few other dogs were sleeping, recruits, survivors, no longer test subjects. Kate leaned back, her gaze following a hawk carving circles in the sky. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if he hadn't remembered me?" she asked. Evan sat beside her, arms wrapped loosely around his knees. "Every day. But that's the thing, isn't it? We tried to make them forget, but they never forgot who they were. We did." There was a pause. Kate nodded. "We called them assets, units, tools." Max shifted his weight, resting his head on her thigh. "But they were family," she finished. Evan looked away, squinting into the sun. "They still are." Across the country, news outlets continued to run follow-ups on the White Dust trials. The federal investigation was expanding. Names were being questioned, facilities audited, medical files reopened. Victims, both human and canine, finally had a voice. Marla Densley, the journalist who first received Evan's file, had returned to the spotlight with a fire that couldn't be extinguished. On a recent live broadcast, she had said, "They taught those dogs to obey, but they never understood what it meant to protect. That came from the heart, and no one could program that out." Lang remained in custody, facing trial. Some said he barely spoke anymore. The silence suited him. It was what he'd built everything on, after all. The sun dipped lower. Kate stood slowly, brushing sand from her pants. Max didn't follow. He simply watched her. His eyes half-lidded, ears twitching gently with the breeze. She turned to him, smiled. "You tired, old man?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. He shifted onto his side, resting his head on the blanket. His chest rose and fell, the motion calm, steady, not strained. Kate knelt beside him again, her voice dropped to a whisper. "We're not experiments anymore." She kissed the top of his head. "We're family." Max's tail wagged once, then again, then stilled. The wind blew gently across the hill. Not cold, not harsh, just enough to lift a few grains of sand and carry them westward, toward the far-off mountains. Kate sat with him, not in mourning, but in thanks. The desert didn't cry, it remembered. And as the stars began to appear, one by one, over Red Hollow's skyline, a single light remained lit in the shelter. The light in Max's old kennel, empty now, but never forgotten. Some stories are written by man, but others are whispered by heaven. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian shaped by pain, a warrior carved by loyalty, and in the end, a messenger of something divine. Maybe he didn't speak in words, but he spoke in sacrifice, and somehow, that was enough to wake the truth the world tried to forget. In a world that often forgets the wounded, Max remembered. He remembered love. He remembered duty. And perhaps, he reminded us all that no soul is ever truly forgotten in God's eyes. So, if you've ever felt lost, alone, or unseen, let this story remind you, even in the driest desert, God sends his angels. Sometimes they have wings. Sometimes they have paws. May the Lord bless every watcher here tonight. May he guide your steps, comfort your heart, and bring you the miracle you didn't even know you were praying for. If this story touched something deep in your soul, leave a comment, share this with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe, because here we tell the stories that break your heart just enough to let the light in.